Hello everyone and welcome to our lunchtime lesson all about supporting children and young people with dyslexia. Our session today is going to be a conversation about how parents, carers and professionals can work together to support dyslexic children to make the most of their time at school. We're so excited to have with us today Cathy, the Chief Executive of Dyslexia Scotland. So just as I said before we get started, some housekeeping. Hopefully those watching live will have heard that automated voice at the beginning, but just to make sure you're aware that this session is being recorded, will be available on Enquire's YouTube channel, and that's why your cameras and microphones are off, and we'd appreciate for you to keep them off for the duration of the session. So first, let me introduce myself. My name is Hannah and I'm a Senior Advice and Information Officer at Enquire. At Enquire, hopefully you've already heard of us if you've arrived today, that Enquire is the advice and information service for additional support for learning in Scotland. We provide advice about support at school and children's rights to parents, carers, professionals and young people themselves. We do this through sessions like this and other information events, as well as our websites, enquire.org.uk and reach.scot, which is our website for young people. We also have a helpline that you can contact by phone, web chat or online form. And lastly, we have a helpline. We have social media and a newsletter that you can sign up to keep up to date with upcoming events. All the information, along with information about Dyslexia Scotland, will be shared at the end of this session. So, as I mentioned, we are very grateful today to be joined by Cathy from Dyslexia Scotland. I will close the PowerPoint and I'll let her introduce herself now and explain a bit about her organisation.
Thank you, Hannah, and thank you very much for inviting me here today. And it's good to see so many people are on the call. So Dyslexia Scotland we're based in Stirling. It's an organisation that works with anyone with dyslexia of any age and anyone who supports dyslexic people. And we aim to inspire and enable dyslexic people to reach their potential in education, learning and life. So you'll hear, I think, different things throughout the discussion about the services and support that we can provide. Delighted to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Cathy. Just to mention, we also have my colleagues Sharon and Jen and Lena from Dyslexia Scotland in the background helping out with the chat. So you might see some comments for them if you're watching live. Today we've prepared some questions for Cathy, which are compiled based on things we hear on the Enquire helpline. We know from our work that dyslexia can have a big impact on children's learning. So we hope today will be a good opportunity to talk more about dyslexia specifically and how we can support dyslexic children to reach their full potential at school. You are welcome to also ask some questions in the chat today, although as the session is only 30 minutes, we may not have time to answer them all. Hopefully the questions we've prepared will speak to a lot of what you're hoping to find out. If you are going to put anything in the chat, please keep it, I suppose, nice and vague in the sense of, for data protection reasons, don't share the names of children or school staff. Just, remembering the audience that is here today. So let's get started with a few questions while we've got Cathy here. So firstly, hopefully an easy one to start with, Cathy, but what is dyslexia?
Okay, so dyslexia is a language-based processing learning difference, which affects someone's ability to learn to read, write and spell, but also has a number of associated difficulties and strengths. And some of those difficulties can include processing, short-term or working memory, organizational ability, things like sequencing, so remembering the patterns, or for example, following the alphabet, for example, can be challenging, and also it has many strengths, which are about really thinking differently and thinking out of the box. So it is a specific learning difficulty, and it is also recognised under the Equality Act. But 1 in 10 of the population are thought to be dyslexic.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting to know. Obviously, there's things that I know as well, Cathy, some of these, but also I think just, 1 in 10 is a huge amount, and perhaps it's something we hear quite commonly about on our helpline as one of the needs that, parents are worried about their children might be struggling with, and are often kind of thinking or talking to the school around. I suppose just kind of moving on from that, you mentioned a few things, but is there any, for parents that are maybe watching, or professionals, is there signs that the schools or parents might see that or should recognise that are potentially related to dyslexia that they might see at school?
Yeah, I mean, it does vary very much. Every dyslexic child and young person will have their own experience of dyslexia. And it also depends on the age and the stage of the child. But so for example, where their dyslexia is unidentified, or if the parent isn't quite sure, they may see their children kind of experiencing sort of challenges, particularly in terms of sort of not understanding why perhaps they're not learning in the same way as their peers. So, they may, it's just an example, as I say, everyone is different, but they may be very good at coming up with ideas and have fantastic imagination, but not always able to kind of put that onto paper. It also can vary from day to day or situation to situation. So it may be that a young child, it feels very comfortable with a particular teacher, and that teacher gets them, but in a different setting they may really struggle. So there are things like reading aloud. That's often a real kind of red flag for many dyslexic children. Parents may notice kind of the difficulties in the learning process and learning to read, write, and perhaps not retaining information. So you may find a parent or a teacher could say to their child, open the book, copy this down, and then after that I want you to do this, that, and the other. And the chances are that they'll only retain the first two, for example. So, that sort of feeling of being behind can quite often be in the classroom, not understanding because they haven't been able to process, what they've actually heard the teacher say, or even with a parent. Many parents tell us, the kind of organization of the school bag, getting someone out of the house in the morning, all of these can be actually sort of fairly challenging for the young person and for parents. But certainly, I think if there's a sort of that processing, it can be verbal processing, it can be written processing, be auditory processing. So, maybe not being able to kind of listen and retain to things at the same time. So all of those things in a classroom setting can appear to be something else. And you'll hear, of children who either, make themselves invisible, because they're trying not to stand out as being different, or they may act as, say, the class clown, for example, as a way of actually trying to disguise the fact that they don't want to be asked to do the thing that they can't do or feel they can't do. So yeah, but as I said earlier, there are lots of strengths with dyslexia. So parents will probably see that more than the children. Possibly more than the children, but also more than the teachers. But equally, parents might see the frustration at the end of a school day when a child is really, really tired and exhausted, and having to process all day can be exhausting. And that might be when parents are seeing, how they really feel in a way that they're able to kind of hide that during the school day.
Yeah, and that's often something we often talk about on the helpline, Cathy, for children with many different needs is that often, you know, they're working so hard at school to manage a lot of feelings, or, you know, the things that they're struggling with or feeling frustrated about, that is, you know, you get in the school, get home, and that's when you're, you know, there's that sort of frustration comes out. Now you're in a safer space. And I think, yeah, there it's I think what you did really well, and kind of what I found really helpful about how you talked about that was that mix of that so many of the needs are individual and might display differently, and, you know, with the laws around children's rights at school, there, you know, that it's clear that it's about a young person's individual needs. So it, you know, it's not about just saying this is what we do for children with dyslexia. It's absolutely getting into kind of what's working, you know, hearing that young person's view, hearing what's happening at home, in building a picture of what's going to work, and celebrating those strengths as well. Is there any particular, I think you already kind of touched on a few there already, Cathy, but do you have kind of any examples of how schools can support children and young people with dyslexia with some of those challenges that you mentioned?
Yeah, I think it's really important for schools to ask the child what works for them. Now, the child might not know that initially, so I think it's really important for a child to kind of understand what their dyslexia means to them, and, you know, what their own strengths are, and also help them to really find what you know, what they're good at, because I think that's really important. And I think having a trusted adult and peers, you know, friends who can actually help them, really helps to kind of build up the confidence. So that whole thing about self-esteem and feeling different, and, you know, we still hear adults talking about, you know, the memories of difficulties they had at school, which really, you know, I think for all of us, you do remember the you know, how you felt in the classroom, particularly when you were criticized or bullied, or, you know, so on. So I think it's really important for the teachers, you know, for that kind of shared understanding of what dyslexia is generally, but also what a particular individual's dyslexia might mean to them. There are many schools that do, you know, particularly say in Dyslexia Awareness Week, there is Ellie's Blue Ribbon campaign, for example, is a fantastic campaign which Dyslexia Scotland runs every year. We distribute around about 50,000 ribbons, and many schools use that as a talking point, so that children and young people can actually talk about their dyslexia and begin to know that it's actually fine. They're not alone. There are other dyslexic children and young people in the school, and really being able to then sort of build on what their strengths are and what they find difficult. So I think, you know, there's lots of it's building on, you know, the strengths might be a strong visual thinking, might be problem solving skills. A dyslexic child may be very good at actually, you know, presenting and verbally talking. So I think it's just trying to find different ways for teachers to assess what their learning is. So it's not always about, you know, well, actually you haven't written that correctly, or you've misspelt it, or, you know, go home and do that again. You know, I think it's really looking beyond the presentation of the work to actually say, well, you know, what has this child understood, and how can we find ways of them getting that information across. But certainly, you know, there are lots of very easy things that can be done in the classroom. For example, instead of asking someone to copy down their homework, let them take a picture of it, or follow that up, so that the teacher actually can send that home to the parents, so that the child's not having to spend their time really kind of processing, looking up and down. That can be really difficult. So I think really just sort of finding quite easy things that can be done in the classroom, which are very helpful for all pupils.
I was just thinking, I imagine quite a lot of those are covered on. I know you have the Addressing Dyslexia toolkit that you've written for, which is for school for professionals and schools. And I think
Mhm.
even whether you're a professional or sometimes, or a parent, looking at that to have some idea can be really useful, the sort of things that might work. And even that, and I know also there's Dyslexia Unwrapped, sort of the hub that you have for young people, and those resources, sort of talking through them, whether you're the parent, the young person, or a professional in the situation, to kind of see, well, what might work, what feels like it might work, and how can we apply those and see. And I think that's where we often kind of talk about whether that's even, having a written plan or something, or at least sitting together with down and talking about, well, what are my strengths, what is difficult, and kind of breaking it down, and then having those types of resources and knowing it's not set in stone that that's gonna help for everyone or has to be done in every school, but are there some ideas that are sometimes quite simple that can really help? So yeah, I think it's always those resources. I know hopefully on the team, I'm sure we'll put those in that are really useful. And I know we signpost to all the time on the helpline as well.
Yeah, no, thank you for doing that. That's great. No, yeah, absolutely. There's lots of information in the Addressing Dyslexia Toolkit and on our website. There's also, we have a YouTube channel with a whole range of different videos which are aimed at teachers, young people, parents, adults. So there's a lot of information there. And I think, in the toolkit, there's a series, there's a section on resources and templates. There is an identification pathway, and linked to that, there's a number of different templates. For example, talking through the Scottish working definition of dyslexia, and that's in a sort of graphic, and it's a really good way of actually kind of for parents and teachers to be able to work together to actually say, well, what, for example, it might have the associated difficulties I mentioned earlier, short-term working memory, and it gives it's the chance for a discussion about the strengths and difficulties that particular young person has. So there's lots of very practical resources for teachers to use, which are very helpful for parents as well. And then, as you said, the Dyslexia Unwrapped and our website, and lots of leaflets for parents, teachers, children and young people, and leaflets on particular topics like tips for helping with reading and writing and spelling, but also with self-esteem and some of the other aspects of dyslexia which are perhaps less well known, but which can, and less well understood, which can really make a difference to a child or young person in the classroom in terms of their learning.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some of those resources, I was just one of our questions we've got, we kind of touched on quite a few that we were thinking of talking around already, but I was thinking some of those resources may be a really helpful starting off point for the parents trying to approach their child's school. So one of the questions, I suppose, just for you to talk a wee bit more on is, how would you suggest parents approach their child's school if they think their child might be dyslexic?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. I think that it's really, really important to go and speak to the teacher in the school. It's very much a partnership, and I think it's about understanding, that the parent is a very, very, obviously knows their own child best, and is a really important partner in enabling and helping the school to understand, what that young person's dyslexia means to them. We have a helpline as well, and we get calls from the Enquire helpline to ours. So I would recommend that people call one of the helplines. There are other resources for parents. So joining Dyslexia Scotland as a member, for example, we have a quarterly magazine which has lots and lots of information for children, young people, and parents and change makers. So we have, we encourage anyone who's working with and helping young people, dyslexic people or adults, to really kind of log what it is they're doing through our website, through our change maker. And we know that many children and young people really get a buzz out of contributing to our magazine, contributing to Dyslexia Unwrapped, sharing their story. All of those things are really important in building up their confidence. So yeah, there's lots of resources, and I think someone's asked if those links will be available afterwards. There'll be lots of links to the relevant parts of our website, and Dyslexia Unwrapped.
Yes, definitely. And I think all those resources, we also have our kind of young people's website, and I think it's kind of similar to, I think it actually mentions Dyslexia Unwrapped as part of it, and that, you know, sharing with the young people you're supporting, or if you're a parent, you know, the experiences of other young people can be really powerful, and knowing kind of what steps to take next, and also, yeah, not feeling that sense that you're starting off this journey but by yourself in that, and is definitely, it can feel there is a lot of resources that are out there for everyone kind of in the picture supporting a young person.
Yeah, and I think one thing in particular, what you really mentioned there, Hannah, is that so when people are starting out on the journey, for parents in particular, we have a network of 18 local branches which are run by volunteers, and there's a few people on the call today from some of the branches, and they are absolutely vital, sources of support for parents to be able to go and speak to other parents, because I think that it really helps. And we have parent masterclasses as well, which are run regularly. And if you look at the events page on our website, you'll see those parent masterclasses, as well as a series of online and face-to-face dyslexia in the classroom classes, which is for teachers. So there's a huge amount of information out there. It can be confusing, I think, when you're first starting out, to say, well, actually, where do I start with dyslexia? There's so much information on the internet. So I would just, suggest speak to the school, contact our helpline, look at our website, and come along to our events locally and nationally.
And absolutely, yeah, I was just about to say that, Cathy, as well. It can be really overwhelming, but, you know, I would say if you can get to the school and feel that they're that partnership can start early with the school, to know. And sometimes what we often talk about is, you know, it's good if you've kind of gathered some information, but also, you know, that the schools also will have their own knowledge and expertise in the classroom. So if you're coming as a parent, you know, also starting with, well, I've got a few ideas, but actually bring it all back to your child, I think, is often really helpful, or the child, because I think often also you can read a lot of things that might be useful, but depending on the classroom and your own the young person that's concerned, it can look very different what's kind of right. So often, you know, we have a few resources as well around kind of approaching the school, also steps to take if you're a bit further and like you feel like you are still worried and things aren't happening the way you want at school, or the way that you don't feel your child's being supported. So there is lots of resources, but yeah, definitely take your time as well, because I know it's a lot to take on. I know we're kind of moving forward in time. One thing kind of around this I wanted to ask specifically, Cathy, was what advice would you give a young person who thinks they might have dyslexia and feels they need more support at school?
So I think if you're a young person with dyslexia, I would advise having a look at Dyslexia Unwrapped. So you'll see that. You can either go directly to that link, or you can go in through I'm a Young Person on the website. In that that's aimed at children and young people aged 8 to 18. There's a lot of information in there, and particularly there are videos, for example, from our young ambassadors talking about their experiences of dyslexia. There's sections on Just for Fun, because when we created the website, lots of young people said, well, you know, I'm a young person, I'm not only known by my dyslexia, I just want stuff that's fun to do. So there's a section which is specifically around that, and there's also a section for young people to create and share their own resources, which they can send in. So definitely look at the Dyslexia Unwrapped. Look at our YouTube channel, and I think lots of the videos with young people speaking, some really good examples of young ambassadors talking about what works for them in the classroom, what they ask the teachers to do, and so on. We have a program called Mission Superheroes, and that's linked to a Mission Dyslexia book. So that's on the Addressing Dyslexia Toolkit. It's for P4 to P7. and there's a series of cartoon characters that represent the strengths of dyslexia, and those characters help to actually overcome Mr. Despicabilia, who is the villain who takes away their time and their spelling ability and so on. So Mission Superheroes is a really good resource for teachers, but parents can use it as well. And you'll see all that on the Addressing Dyslexia Toolkit. But there's a linked book called Mission Dyslexia, and I think for children and young people, that's a really helpful book, particularly for kind of ages sort of P4 to 7, so 8 to 12 or so. Other things for if you're a child or a young person with dyslexia, we do run youth days from time to time, and there's one in Stirling on the 23rd of March. So if you're a young person or you're a parent listening to this, then we really recommend that you look at going along to that. So many of the young people that come along to that event come away at the end of the day saying that they feel for the first time that they belong and that they're understood because they've talked to other people who are in the same position as them. So I think talking to other dyslexic children, also don't be afraid to ask for help, and don't be afraid to speak to your friends about dyslexia. You know, as I said earlier, there's lots of dyslexia assemblies, pupil assemblies, you know, chance during Dyslexia Awareness Week to go along to children's author events and all sorts of events that children and young people can join in on. And you know, we love hearing about the strengths as well. So we'd love to hear from you as a young person if you want to write a poem or do a drawing or take photographs or whatever. And we can publish that in our magazine.
Fantastic. Thank you, Cathy. I think that's really really nice way to kind of wrap up this conversation on. I'm just going to share briefly our some information just for those that are that we will be sharing as well, just to say firstly thank you so much to Cathy for joining us. I hope this, I know it can feel quite quick to do in half an hour, but I hope this session was helpful for everyone who attended. We would be really grateful if you have a moment to either to scan that QR code or follow the link Sharon or Jen will be posting now to our evaluation forum, just to see, if you can let us know if this event is useful and how we can and if there's any ways that we can improve for the future. As mentioned, we will, for those watching live, we'll send out a follow-up email in the next week with a link to the session on YouTube in case you didn't catch it or had any technical problems. We'll also include any other information that's been mentioned here or has come up in the comments that we think might be helpful. And I'll just end with our wee slide that just covers contact details and the main websites that Cathy's mentioned and contact details for Enquire. But yeah, just to conclude, thank you so much to Cathy, and thank you for everyone who's taken half an hour at their lunch break to listen to this. I really hope it was useful. So I will just close the meeting, but thank you very much, everyone.